Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Pollock. Cheryl Smith, Cara Henderson and Alison McConnell are here with me. Scotland fell to a 4-0 defeat at the hands of Germany. Alison, was it just a case of a slow start from Scotland?
Yeah, I think it's more a case of they were just up against high quality opposition. I think, oddly enough, I think there were flashes where Scotland looked quite comfortable on the ball, but I think they have two kind of main problems that have probably underpinned their failure to get to major tournaments in recent seasons, and that is I think they're quite sloppy defensively at the back and they're just not clinical in the opposite box, and I think that's always going to be a headache until you solve it. But I think Germany, you can see, they're head and shoulders above Scotland. There's a lot of quality there. I thought they were very impressive, took their chances, but there's just moments where you think that Scotland are architects of their own downfall too.
What needs to change, Cheryl, going into tomorrow?
I don't know if they can change much of how they're going to play going into tomorrow. It was actually quite strange because I thought that they, like you say, I thought they were actually quite comfortable in that first half, even though they conceded 2 goals, but it was 2 sucker punches. They were behind within a minute and then the own goal, so it was quite a strange performance in the first half, and then obviously the 2 goals in the second half when they're coming out and trying to get something from the game. I think he'll probably play pretty much the same way. They did try and, as I said, they tried to be brave and they tried to attack, and it sort of worked, but we remember that Germany are third in the world. They're third in the world for a reason, so it ended up becoming just a kind of a game where they just tried to not concede any more goals than the 4 that they did. So it'll be interesting to see how he approaches it tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, he certainly believes that 4-0 wasn't a fair result on Friday night.
I think he earned that possession, the quality of our play and the bravery of our play. We used the size of the pitch. We wanted to be expansive. We wanted to be brave. I think the respect's there as well because of the performance against Netherlands also, and building into this. So there's lots of positives in that sense that I'm sure we'll reflect on as the days go by, but at the moment the scoreline hurts. Was a 4-0 result a fair or harsh result in the end, Cara?
I don't know, I think it's hard. I think obviously they're playing against quality opposition. A lot of learning points will have come from the game. I think that's the most important thing now, is that you look tomorrow night and you look at how can they've played against these players. Of course, there'll probably be rotation from both sides, but what little differences can they make? Can they have more possession? Can they have more shots on goal? I think little things like that. Can they maybe pinpoint players that they played against that thought, okay, we can actually get at this person? I think that'll have been a good indication. But if you look at the bigger picture, I think that, when Scotland are coming up against Germany, it feels almost like, these are really, really big, almost not one-off games, but they're big, big ties. Whereas if Scotland can get themselves in a position where they'll consistently qualify for major tournaments, they'll be around opposition like this a lot more. So I think that in terms of was it a fair or harsh result, it probably was a fair result. Germany were better, but I actually think the scoreline doesn't matter. It's how can you improve the little things across the performance and then compare the two, because if they go to Germany tomorrow night and it's a heavier defeat, or it's, there's not improvements, and I'd say that's more of a question. But you've played them, you've now got the chance to play them again. Caroline Weir, I'm sure, said during the week that they want to play against the best. That's where you test yourself. So I think if they can get to a position where we consistently play against these good teams, and when we are, we notice little things that we are getting better against these teams. I think that's the most important thing going forward.
Is it a positive to be in League A then, Alison, to play against the higher opposition?
Yeah, I think so. I think Scotland are at an odd point. I think you saw them coast their way through League B. When they were in League A before, it was very, very sobering. I think they finished bottom of the group. Ended with that 6-0 hammering against England at Hampden. You see the differentials between the two leagues, but I probably think there's an argument to say that you'll learn more from playing against better opposition, albeit it's fairly sobering at points, and I think it can be indicative of how much you still have to do, but I think there is probably scope for learning playing against elite level teams. I think this is a country that wants to get back to playing at European Championships, to playing at World Cups. This is the level of opposition that you would then be facing, not just there, but trying to get there, like maybe through a playoff system or so. Yeah. This is the kind of level that you're going to need to be able to live with at points. So I think there are, however difficult it is, I think there are benefits to being in the top league.
Yeah, I think you're right in that they need to play against the best teams, because no one gets good at anything, if they're not playing against the top teams. But what's difficult is they're stuck in a rut now with 3 defeats. So how do they get out of that while they're playing those teams? Because they're not able to build any momentum at the moment or get any confidence going forward because they're facing teams that are just far superior to them. So I think that's tricky. Even it's just, I don't really know what the answer is, but it's hard. You want to play against the best, obviously, but how do you build your confidence when you're routinely getting beat?
Well, Scotland do have players who are with some of the biggest teams in the world, so how do we bridge that gap to a Germany or a Holland when we come up against them in these competitions?
It was really difficult. I think certainly you look at Erin Cuthbert and Caroline Weir and you think, you know, you really want to be building your team around these players, or certainly building your midfield around these players and giving them licence to go and perform the way that they do at club level. We have to remember though, at club level they are also surrounded by better quality players too.
Yeah.
You know, they're playing with players who have designs on winning the Champions League. They're playing with colleagues who are going on and competing and winning World Cup titles. You know, they are playing with the elite too. So I think certainly they have qualities that they can bring to Scotland, and you want to tap into that. But it's probably bigger than just looking at 2 specific players and saying, you know, here we go, we've got a couple of world-class talents here. Can we build the team around it? I think you need a system that's going to work. I think this is a Scotland team very much in transition when you look at an old guard being phased out and some younger players coming in. There's a manager who's there on an interim basis. I think there'll be a permanent appointment. You would think over the next couple of months there'll be potentially a new manager coming in. And I think it's really about setting up a system where first and foremost Scotland become difficult to beat, and then from there going and seeing what they can do in an attacking sense.
Just touching on that as well, you don't want to become too reliant on the sort of more
Same
work.
too.
Yeah.
Like, I think you've got, as Alison said, you've got to build your team around these players because they are, you know, bags and bags of talent and quality, but they can only be as good as they can if they've got a system around them that works. Like Alison said, it's like taking, you know, Ronaldo out of a team or putting Ronaldo in a team that's dysfunctional. He's not going to score as many goals. He might still score 20, but could he score 40? You know, it's just that they've got to, everything round about them has to work as well. And I think in a point when you become too reliant on 2 players to score the goals or dig them out or, you know, run around the pitch constantly, that's when it becomes a problem. And I think that's what you said. I think it's interesting that Mick McCardle's really tried to blend the older players with youth. You know, Ailey Adams, Emma Lawton are playing that. It's an interesting balance, but at the moment you've got a team that probably hasn't gelled together as a squad. I think there's now 2 camps that's going to happen. So going forward, how can you build the team around these quality players, but also have enough quality players coming through that the whole thing works, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Would you say then that we don't have enough players playing at an elite level? When we have, you know, your Erin Cuthberts and your Caroline Weirs, we need a larger bank of players in the top leagues.
Yeah, I think that's $1 million question. You know, I think that's what, if you look at successful international teams and either the men's or the women's games, where they tend to play their football is at the very top level of the game. They tend to be playing for teams who are performing well in the huge competitions like the Champions League. So I think some of it is generational. I think when you look at where Scotland were when they qualified for the European Championships in 2017, when they qualified for the World Cup in 2019, you look at players of the ilk of Kim Little, you know, genuine world-class talents. Like, I think sometimes you have a generational cycle where you have a clutch of really good players. I think Scotland maybe could look back and see that when you look at the players that qualified for the World Cup and the European Championships. But also I think other nations have improved at a rate of knots. I think there has been in other countries more investment, quicker progress, an acceleration of the women's game that maybe we have not seen here in Scotland. I think you only have to look to England to even see that too. Like, obviously the benefit of hosting and then winning the European Championships and the interest it gives rise to the commercial spin-off of that, and then what that does for the growth of the game. I think Scotland still lags very much behind in terms of all those elements. So I think it is about definitely trying to bring through players that can go on and feature and play at a higher level, but it's very difficult to get to that place. I think what you need to be doing is developing the league first and foremost. You want to have a professional structure all the way through the league, improving the league. The offset of that is that the national team becomes better and that you have players going and playing at a different kind of level altogether. But it takes time. it will take time. I think it's not going to be something that happens overnight. Like, you're going to have to be prepared to see that some of the fruits that are there just now will take a wee bit of time to ripen. But certainly if you look at youth levels just now and under 19 levels, under 17, it looks good for Scotland, for the women's team. It looks as though there are players coming through. It's just about fulfilling that kind of potential.
Yeah, here's what Erin Cuthbert had to say. She spoke very candidly after that defeat on Friday night.
But that's no excuses. Like, we're Scotland, we want to be hard to beat first and foremost. Like, we're disappointed giving 4 goals away. Like, no matter what, whether it's a transition period or not, like, we're disappointed. We want to be keeping clean sheets, being hard to beat, and then, you know, taking our chances when it comes.
The SWPL returns this weekend as well, an Edinburgh derby and an Old Firm game to look forward to. Cheryl, does Celtic have to beat Rangers if they have any hopes of finishing even second in the league table?
Well, I think first of all they have to try and win a game because they're on a losing run that has to come to an end. And this is, I don't know if people maybe think this is not the best game for it, but it probably is, because it might just put a spark in them after the international break. And then secondary to that, they have to beat Rangers. They've not beaten them at all this season, and then they can think of where they're going to finish in the table. They obviously still have aspirations to finish first.
Yeah.
I don't think the table doesn't really lie. I don't think they're going to finish first. I think they're probably going to struggle to finish second. So I don't think it's necessarily they need to beat them for any place in the table. It's just they need to beat Rangers because they haven't beaten them, and they need to start winning again if they're going to get anywhere near to the top.
Are Celtic, Alison, finding themselves in a position where they're relying on maybe 2 or 3 other teams dropping points to better their position in the league table?
Yeah, I think they definitely need favours from elsewhere. If you look at what the difference is, they're 9 points off of Hibs now, going into the finale of the campaign. So obviously they've still got everyone to play a couple of times. But yeah, I think realistically they would be needing favours from other teams. But I just don't think there is any evidence to suggest that this is a Celtic team that could go between now and the end of the season unbeaten. I think when you look at recent performances over the campaign, I think they've not been good enough. They've lost their last 3 successive league games. I think you'd struggle to work out when the last time was that happened. It's certainly not the form of champions at this stage of a season. I think it's a huge game for them on Sunday. I think if Rangers were to win it, I think you'd see Celtic struggling. They're in a fight for 4th, I think, if they end up on the losing side on Sunday.
The message from Jo Potter, Cara, as we've seen after her games, is they need to keep that level of consistency against any opponent it may be. So Celtic will be no stranger as to what animal they're going to come up against on Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll know exactly what players that they're playing against. Everyone knows the goal threats they've got. They're solid at the back as well. So yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting because Rangers are now in a position where they can win a treble, which is a really interesting place to be. And then Celtic are in a position where they certainly don't want their greatest rivals doing that as well. So I think, as Cheryl said, I think the first and foremost Celtic need to get back to winning ways, because that breeds confidence. If you're constantly losing end, and I don't know, I think obviously we'll find a bit in here. I feel like it's been quite broken up in recent weeks. That Celtic seem that they're playing on a Friday night and then they're waiting 2 weeks to play again. So they'll want to get some consistency. That's coming now. Obviously there'll be a free weekend when the semi-finals take place, but they've got a good run of games here, very hard games, very competitive games. They've got the time in between to prepare for them better than they did at the start of the season. So I agree. I think that this is the perfect opportunity, but they are coming up against a team that that are high flying. They're full of confidence at the moment, and they won't be easy. Even though, as you said, they will probably know what to expect from them. Yeah,
Hearts take on Hibs in the capital as well. Cheryl, another interesting matchup. If Celtic do fall to a defeat to Rangers and Hearts are victorious in Edinburgh, then Eva Olid's side could be eyeing up 3rd place.
Yeah, I think Hearts are probably, as Alison had touched on, Hearts are probably Celtic's competition now, which is strange to say because they are the reigning champions, but they haven't performed well enough defending the title. Like, Champions League or not, they've not been in the Champions League since before the turn of the year, so I don't really think that can play an element. But Hearts have fallen down the league slightly. They're not within that top 2 or 3, but they'll definitely feel that they can probably take Celtic's spot somewhere around that top half. And they're coming up against a Hibs side who obviously have been flying all season, so it'll be difficult. It'll be difficult for them. I'm not sure they'll get the win over Hibs at the weekend. I expect Hibs to come out on top in that one.
Yeah, well, just at the last point I thought we should touch on a little bit of sad news of the Women's League. It was announced last week that Queen's Park would be pulling some funding from, meaning that the women's team would be axed. The academy will no longer be in commission next season, and of course some first team men's players will be released as well. Cara, as a player, what does that mean going forward? What is your mindset coming out of that?
It's really hard. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, they're not in an ideal position in the league anyway, but I think that makes it really hard to know. I know quite a lot of the girls there; they're all really good girls. So I don't know. It's not a great statement. It's not great for the game. I think that there's obviously been more going on behind the scenes for a while than probably we all knew, and I think that from a player perspective, it puts you in a really weird place because they had the fight on their hand. They were fighting for survival. Now, potentially, I don't know. Does it not matter now particularly? I suppose it doesn't.
It's a bit of a slap in the face that they're collateral damage and kind of an afterthought to a thing that's happening on the men's side.
Well, that's it. I suppose it shows probably still where we are as a game, that the men's side of these things, where teams, obviously Glasgow City are exempt and maybe some other, but the men's side of things, if they're not doing well, it does have consequences still, so you're probably still slightly reliant, which I think is obviously not ideal, and it's definitely in this case that's what's happened, that because the funding's getting pulled, there's a knock-on effect, and clearly they think that the women's team can go, and I don't know, I think it's tough. I really don't know if as a player where you go from it. I think they'll obviously want to try and enjoy the last bit. I know they're a close-knit group of girls, and it's a strange one. It doesn't make for good reading, is what I would probably say about it.
Does that kind of highlight where we are as well, Alison, that we still have a bit to go, that, as Cheryl said, the women's team are suffering from something that's going on the other side of it?
Yeah, I think it's just so precarious. I think the withdrawal of sponsorship, which funded the women's team and which funded the academy, has been withdrawn or will be withdrawn. And so from June, that will be the end of any financial support for it. So I think unless they can attract another sponsor, then I think it's really difficult, and I think it just shows you just how fragile the women's game still is, and the lack of the support network or any kind of scaffolding round about it, just to inoculate it against things like that.
Just before we finish then, Scotland do take on Germany tomorrow. Cheryl, how do we see it going? Will there be changes from Mick McCardle going into this?
I think he'll probably make changes. I think it'll be a similar type of performance, or they'll certainly try and put on a similar type of performance. It's difficult for them. They're coming up against Germany in Germany. I don't expect them to get anything out of the game, but he'll just be looking to go over there and just put in a solid performance, and like Cara was saying earlier, just improve on the little bits, make it better.
Alison?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I can't see it. I can't see anything other than a similar scoreline to Friday night. I think it'll be tough for Scotland. I think they've just got to go and try and make it as difficult and as awkward as possible for as long as possible. But I think the reality is it might be quite a long night.
Yeah, Cara, just what you were saying earlier, just keep all the little things intact.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that they've got a good reference point now. They saw, their opposition very clearly on Friday night, and so they've got to go and test themselves against it. I think they've actually got the players to do that. Like, we talk about that quality. They do have somebody that can go and, pull a great strike out the bag. They've got a committed group. So I think it'll be interesting. They've probably got nothing to lose. I don't think people are maybe expecting them to go and get a result. So make it as difficult as possible and try and improve on things that they can from Friday night.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back next week to discuss more action in the women's game. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching.